seriously, degenerates, with their lovers, with their financial affairs, anywhere to make a fast buck, anyone to make a fast buck. There were just no limits on their greed and their disgusting lifestyle. There were just no limits on it.
Hi, all. Welcome to Kinsey Schofield Unfiltered. Joining us today is Jonathan Goldberg KC. You were such a huge fan last time. I said, would you please come back and spend some time with me? One of UK's most highly regarded criminal defense lawyers. He's defended over 100 murder cases and worked with numerous high profile clients over the years. He now co hosts the true crime podcast, I Rest My Case with Dean Strang, who many of you might recognize as the defense attorney for Stephen Avery in Making a Murderer. You can find I Rest My Case now available on YouTube and wherever you listen to podcasts. And I'll make sure I link that for you for anyone who's curious and wants to follow that along. Jonathan, welcome back, and thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Kinsey, and may I say that flattery will get you everywhere.
You are my favorite. Okay, let's talk about your Epstein podcast because you did an amazing job going, a pretty forensic job of going over the chaos surrounding Jeffrey Epstein. And one of the words that you and Dean used to describe Jeffrey Epstein, and I think this works really well if we're talking about Andrew Mountbatten-Windsor, is transactional. Tell me about that. The word transactional in Jeffrey Epstein, it really does seem to define this wormy little man.
Well, I think people didn't realize it at the time. And my God, the chaos he has unleashed amongst the rich, the powerful, and the mighty, our leaders, is just incredible. You couldn't make this up, could you? But transactional in that they thought he was such a lovely, witty, friendly, generous guy. Come on my private jet to my private island in the Caribbean, my house in Paris, my best townhouse in Manhattan, my glorious ski lodge and my wonderful ranch in New Mexico, etc. So they thought he was just this wonderful host and nice man. And my God, were they naive when you see what's happened now. So the guy was keeping meticulous records on everybody, not just the girls. Of course, we now know, don't we, from Lord Peter Mandelson and his downfall in London, we now know that there was a boys' department too. It wasn't just girls. Oh, yes, there's a photo has emerged in the British press just 2 days ago showing Mandelson having his feet rubbed or massaged by a sort of hunky young fellow whose face has been blacked out. Oh, yes, and of course, Kevin Spacey was a very welcome guest. These are both two proudly gay men, and I doubt that they were there just for the excellent cooking that they no doubt got. So transactional because he was keeping meticulous records. He was photographing them all in compromising situations, including, of course, ex-President Clinton, who now has to testify to Congress. This guy, nobody knows how he made his money. I mean, he died leaving well over $600 million, which to me is a lot of money, although perhaps not by your standards, Kinsey.
No, don't worry, it is.
It is. And nobody knows where it came from. It's quite extraordinary. I mean, the guy was a school teacher originally. It's a very good.
Yes, and I know you read some of those emails. He could barely spell. He couldn't spell to save his life. And you're like, why did anyone trust this person? He can't spell.
Well, he was actually sacked as a school teacher for poor performance after 2 years at the Dalton School in New York, which is a very posh sort of waspy establishment. One of my nephews, in fact, went there. Anyway, so this guy, he didn't even have a money manager's license. He worked for a time at Bear Stearns, the investment house that eventually went bump in the 2008 recession. But after that, nobody that just, it's the mystery of mysteries. And yet he suddenly surfaces as this multimillionaire in high society, in and out of Buckingham Palace and Balmoral, because of his friend, then Prince Andrew. and his wife, Sarah Ferguson, the ghastly Sarah Ferguson. I mean, it's just an extraordinary story, but I'm rattling on. Transactional in the sense that nobody got anything from this man, as you can now see in retrospect, without paying for it in future. And indeed, it ruined their futures by and large. He was poisoned, wasn't he?
Oh my gosh, so toxic.
If I may just interrupt you, forgive me, you're even reading now that maybe he was a Russian agent. Maybe Putin put him there all along, and it was Putin's money to wreak the havoc that he has wreaked.
Well, I mean, you just said you've done so much research in his background and the history of this guy who just pops up out of nowhere, fake it till you make it. And he actually does make it. And the fact that he has this mystery fund, this that he uses to ultimately, and he has access to all of these important people. I've had people ask me, across the pond, have you heard of some of these conspiracies? I'm like, I think conspiracies is a pretty aggressive word. I think that these are theories at this point, legitimate, potentially theories at this point in time, because he did have access to such important people and it did not make sense.
No, it didn't make sense. He's Mr. Nobody from nowhere who suddenly is mixing with prime ministers, presidents, cabinet ministers, theater stars. I mean, just you name it. And then you get ultimately people like Mandelson. And this is the great scandal that has just emerged in Britain. It's absolutely going on even as we speak.
Yeah.
And he's passing to Epstein documents from the British cabinet, which have price-sensitive information about the attempts by Britain in 2008 and 2009 to emerge from the world recession. And Epstein is getting confidential briefing documents that literally go to the Prime Minister and members of the cabinet, telling him what's going to be bought and what's going to be sold, which of course is a fabulous opportunity for him to do some insider trading. But more importantly, as we're talking about governments, nations here, not just individual stocks and shares. More importantly, I imagine Mr. Putin would have liked to know what to buy and sell as well. So, of course, it's a conspiracy theory, but just nobody knows where this man got his money and where he got it. Well, one could say you do know, don't you, where he got his influence from. I mean, he was amassing all this incredibly compromising sexual material on these famous people. So we know exactly where he got his leverage from.
Well, you mentioned Peter Mandelson. Do you think that he could be in legal trouble after this? We'll talk about Prince Andrew in a little bit, but like you said, this is unbelievable that he would share this information with Jeffrey Epstein. There's literally no justification for it whatsoever.
I'm sure Mandelson had a sleepless night last night and for many nights, and I'm sure he is a terrified man today. And I'll tell you why. Because in Parliament yesterday, our awful Prime Minister, I'm giving you my frank opinion, Sir Keir Starmer, our awful Prime Minister, tried to unload everything, did unload every possible piece of blame on Mandelson. So it wasn't his fault for appointing him to the vitally important position of US ambassador to Trump, effectively, as he, of course, did a few months ago. And then this scandal emerged and he had to fire him just days ago. It wasn't his fault. How was he to know? But the point is that everyone did know what a crook Mandelson was, because, this isn't his first rodeo. He has a long history of being sacked for shady deals. If I go back, I'm just looking at my notes. If I go back to 1998, for example, let's start off by telling you what Mandelson is and was.
Yeah.
So he's the proudly gay, and he was one time in his younger days a proud communist, by the way, visiting Cuba and so forth as a young student and incredibly activist. But a champagne communist, boy, did he develop a taste for the high life, as we'll see soon. So he starts life as a very left-wing student. He had a great political pedigree because his grandfather was the great and famous Sir Herbert Morrison, who in the first socialist government after the Second World War, Attlee became prime minister, replacing Churchill. Do you remember the great Winston Churchill? He hadn't won the war 10 minutes, and then the electorate of Britain booted him out. Incredibly, no, it was just, a landslide, and it amazed people. Nobody expected it, because obviously the British public were quite sophisticated and realized he was a great wartime leader, but probably wouldn't be such a great peacetime leader now that they had to rebuild. One has to say that the Labour government that came in, despite all the prognostications that it would be communist and Britain would slide downhill, it was actually a very good government. I mean, they created, and I'm conservative when I say that, but they created the National Health Service, they created the welfare state, they did all the things that, a war-torn Britain needed to get back on its feet. Anyway, the Home Secretary in that cabinet was the late, great Sir Herbert Morrison, a Jewish East End boy who clawed his way up from nothing, a man of great integrity, and he became Home Secretary in that cabinet. Now, Mandelson is his grandson. And I tell you, the old boy must be not turning in his grave today, but spinning. So Mandelson becomes, under Tony Blair, they call him the Prince of Darkness, and he becomes really the first spin doctor, as we would call him today. And he's great in improving Tony Blair's image. And Tony Blair gave Mandelson a great deal of credit for his victory in the 90s when he became prime minister. And again, the next Labour government after that, great one after the Second World War. So Tony Blair loved Mandelson. He could do no wrong. And the first thing he did was that in Mandelson, the first of Mandelson's scandals, he was a cabinet minister. And then in 1998, when his department, he's head of the Trade and Industry Department, which kind of speaks for itself as to what it does. And they're investigating, interestingly enough, Robert Maxwell, who's now dead. He's fallen off his yacht. The pension fund has gone. This is Ghislaine's dictatorial father, who became a press baron. Credible man in his own right. He was a kid, 16 years old, when the Nazis came into his little village in Czechoslovakia. All his family were murdered in the concentration camps. He fled, he walked literally across occupied Europe into France, managed to get on a boat to England, where he had to lie about his age. He joined the army, very Ninth Regiment, of course, the only one that would take him. They were called the Pioneer Corps. They buried the bodies in the war, literally. Cut a long story short, he had a wonderful war. He got all sorts of decorations. He killed an awful lot of Germans with a great deal of bravery, sort of charging machine gun posts single-handedly and the like. And after a very good war, becoming a major, he became an officer. And he hardly speaks English, by the way, even then, but he learns English. He marries a very fine lady who had been very big in the French resistance, his wife Betty, great intellectual. She wrote many books. And he has this brilliant idea. I'm going to become a publisher. I'm going to publish scientific textbooks. Now, what country in the world has 1 million authors who can't find a publisher because nobody wants to touch them with a barge pole? Answer, Germany, that's just been defeated. So he gives the opportunities to all these German scientists who can't find a publisher. He publishes them. Anyway, he becomes an enormously successful publisher. By now, he is speaking English. He becomes a member of parliament. He buys a castle near Oxford. He has, I think, 7 children, of whom Ghislaine is the youngest and the apple of his eye, his darling daughter. But he's a dictator to everybody, and a most dictatorial father. These kids can't get a present unless they work for it and earn it, from the age of nothing. He brought them up that way. And then eventually, in the early 90s, he falls off his yacht. His great controversy, was he pushed or did he fall? Or indeed, was it a suicide? And they then discover that the pension fund of his enormous newspaper, the Mirror Group, which was then the biggest selling newspaper, the tabloid in Britain, the pension fund has gone missing. It's gone missing because he's been propping up the company's share price falsely, with it. So
that might lead some to believe that he did take his own life because he was trying to escape whatever the consequences were of that.
It might, but he was in such a murky way in so many deals with Russians and so forth that there were other possibilities, to put it mildly.
Wow.
Now, how does this connect with Mandelson? Answer, because I'm now coming to it, forgive me. So Mandelson's Trade and Industry Department, at the time he is a cabinet minister under Tony Blair in the late 90s, is investigating the pension fund scandal. And one of the people connected with that, loosely, and I think probably innocently, as it turned out, was another cabinet minister called Jeffrey Robinson. And Jeffrey Robertson had links with Maxwell. So now Mandelson says to Jeffrey Robertson, please lend me about £500,000 because I want to buy a very smart house in Notting Hill. And Robinson, who was a very wealthy man, said, oh, certainly, what's £500,000 to you and me, Peter? We're such good friends. And Mandelson now buys a magnificent house in Notting Hill, this lovely area of London. Amazing, isn't it, that you could get it in those days for £500,000? Yes. But anyway, then it was a fortune, of course. Today, I guess you'd pay 20 million. There you go. So the press discover this, and there's an enormous scandal. How could you borrow money to buy a house that you can't really afford on your salary from a man who's being investigated through the Maxwell investigation by your own cabinet department? So even Tony Blair, who loved the Prince of Darkness so much, couldn't keep him on. That was Mandelson's first resignation. But of course, the way it works is, they give them 6 months to cool off and pretend they're sorry, and then they're brought back. So we've now got him back in 2001. He's back in the cabinet in a different job. And this time, there's a vastly wealthy Indian billionaire living in London mainly called Hinduja. And he's very annoyed because they won't give him a British passport, although he's doing so much for the British economy, undoubtedly. Yeah. Well, he now gets his passport, but the press then discover that there's some very interesting financial links, allegedly, between Mandelson and Hinduja. So he resigns again. Well, that doesn't stop this man's meteoric rise to the top, because he then becomes appointed, they sort of shuffle him sideways to Britain was then in the EU, the European Union, before Brexit. And he gets appointed for 4 years as an EU trade commissioner, which is a lovely job, because you get a beautiful house in Brussels, you get an enormous salary, you travel all over the world and meet all the important industrialists in every country in the world. There's now another scandal, because the king of aluminium in Russia is a man called Oleg Deripaska. He's an oligarch. He seems to have survived, what's gone on with Putin pretty well. He's in the inner circle, but he's the king of aluminium worldwide. And what do you know, Mandelson goes on a beautiful holiday on Deripaska's yacht, and they're spotted having a marvelous time off Corfu. And the press get hold of this story. And what do you know, it then emerges that Mandelson, as EU Trade Commissioner, has brought in some sort of regulation or deregulation for aluminium for the whole of the EU. And Deripaska benefits by multi-millions, you see.
Oh, my gosh. Maybe he was just conveniently on the yacht to negotiate those terms. So maybe
No. Oh, no, please, Kinsey. He's a man of probity. And when he gave a statement to the press, he said they hadn't discussed aluminium at all on the holiday. It was just, an enjoyable holiday in the sun, as one does. And the subject of aluminium was taboo because it wouldn't have been proper for them to discuss it.
Oh, okay.
So, you have a very horrible mind, Kinsey. So what happens then is that he doesn't have to resign. He gets away with that one. But then you may remember that there was the rivalry between Tony Blair and his Chancellor of the Exchequer, Gordon Brown. It went on for many years. And eventually they persuade, indeed, Mandelson's very instrumental in persuading Blair to finally resign. Tony, you've had 3 terms, give it to somebody else. Now it's enough. And Brown gets the job of prime minister between 2008 and 2010 when Brown loses the election. Actually, Brown was can I just interrupt myself to say, Brown was a very good man, you know. He was a man of great integrity, is a man of great integrity. He was the son of a Scottish vicar, a church-going man, but, you know, he's old school, is Brown.
Yeah.
And yet, Brown still brings Mandelson in because he's just so clever politically. His spin doctor skills are as great as they ever were, and he brings him into the cabinet again in a very senior position, really number 2 in the cabinet. He becomes Lord President of the Council and the right-hand man of Gordon Brown. And what's he doing behind Brown's back? As we now know, it's taken another 17 years to find out. But we now know from the Epstein documents that have been released only last week, he's betraying Brown the whole time. He's writing Epstein the most awful emails about his boss Brown, who they call Mr. Smelly. Mr. Smelly. Oh yeah, Mr. Smelly this and Mr. Smelly that. And finally I'm pushing Mr. Smelly out, and finally Mr. Smelly. And he's leaking to him these confidential papers about the attempts of Britain to recover from the world recession in 2008, 2009. You couldn't make this stuff up, could you?
It's insane. And also, I noticed that his defense, when he starts really getting cornered about Epstein, is, I'm gay. I wouldn't have seen anything. I'm gay. I mean, what a lazy and irrational reaction to all of this.
Well, isn't it wonderful? I call him Prince Andrew.
I accidentally do too. I know. It's hard.
Even though he's not anymore. But anyway, you've got Prince Andrew in that incredible interview he foolishly gave to Emily Maitlis of Newsnight in Britain in November 2019, what they call the car crash interview of all interviews.
Yes.
And you've got him saying, well, you know, I was staying at Epstein's house in Manhattan, but it's a very big house. Indeed, it is. It's the biggest townhouse in Manhattan, reputedly. So he says, it's like Grand Central Station. You've got women coming and going, and I would meet them in the corridor and say good morning, but I didn't know who they were, you know, attractive young women. I mean, this kind of thing that goes on in a railway station. That's his story. And you've got Mandelson saying, oh, yes, I was there frequently at different times, you know, wonderful house, wonderful dinner parties. I was often the guest of honor. He says, but I'm a gay man. So, you know, what may be obvious to you, I'm afraid to me, I don't notice this kind of thing. Oh, boy.
I mean, common sense says I'm putting my pants on if there's somebody else in the room. You know what I mean? And a camera. You know, I don't care. Behavior wise, I just feel like I should have my pants on, Peter Mandelson.
Well, doesn't this say something, about the amount of trust and confidence that they had in Epstein?
Yes.
They were confident. And what about Clinton, you know, in the hot tub and all the rest of it? They were just confident that their great friend would never betray them. So he must have had a wonderful way about him, mustn't he?
Yeah.
That the most cynical people in the world, really, people like Mandelson and Clinton, I mean, it's not their first rodeo, and yet they thought they could relax. This friend would never betray them. For these photos to be taken at all, as you rightly say. So it says something about the confidence they had in him, the genius he had in being able to make them think that he was their best friend and would never betray them. And indeed, we're just talking about these documents that were leaked to Epstein by Peter Mandelson, this experienced political operator, and the way he's writing these emails to him that could have been used against him at any time. All right, one may perhaps expect this kind of stupidity from former Prince Andrew and his wife Fergie, you know,
Yes.
two grifters who haven't got couldn't pass a school examination between them. I mean, the pair of them are notoriously stupid.
We say that they're not the brightest bulbs on the Christmas tree.
Quite. Then one can expect this kind of stupidity, even though they've got more advisors than you can shake a stick at, and they were obviously ignoring. But of people like Clinton and Mandelson and so many others who were sucked into this web. They're not the only ones. There's so many other players of small parts in this drama. It's just incredible that they were so stupid about it.
You're so right.
I would have been. I don't think you would have been. And yet they were.
Yeah, it's disappointing because these are our world leaders. These are the people that are controlling the way that we are navigating, the economy, wars. I mean, it's very unfortunate. So we talked about Peter Mandelson and how he might have jeopardized his future with these emails.
Oh, sorry, I never answered your question. Can I just come back in there?
Of course, yes.
So of course, he was like Dracula until you actually put a stake through his heart at a lonely crossroads. He kept coming back. So then you get eventually the Labour government comes in again after all these years under Keir Starmer, and he appoints him virtually straight away as ambassador to Washington, this incredibly sensitive and important post, and having to deal with Trump. And Starmer thought he's the only person who can really, deal with Trump and get the measure of it. And indeed, he and Trump become great mates after 2 minutes. They meet the first time and the press are there. And what does Trump say to him? Obviously, knowing who he is, what a wonderful looking man you are, is Trump's first conversation.
That was almost my opening line to you.
Kinsey, if only you weren't too old for me.
I love when you make that joke. Hey friends, want to hear a secret? Creatone by Brickhouse Nutrition was developed by doctors specifically for women. It powers your body at the cellular level, supporting steady energy, sharp focus, and better overall output without the crash or burnout. Creatine is known for weightlifting performance, but its benefits go far beyond the gym. Research suggests it may support brain function, reduce fatigue, improve mood, and help preserve muscle and bone as we age, even if you rarely lift a barbell. Creatone stacks seamlessly with most supplements, especially protein and magnesium, and was designed to complement, not compete, with your current routine. With daily use, energy feels more consistent, your body feels stronger and more balanced, and your shape looks visibly toned. Confidence grows right alongside your results. Try it and feel supported, energized, and strong from within. Let me get you started with 20% off your first order. Visit tonetoday.com, promo code Kinsey. That's promo code Kinsey at tonetoday.com.
Back to Mandelson. So here he is, the most sensitive diplomatic post that Britain can offer, and it's a wonderful life, and he loves this champagne life. As I said to you, he's no longer the communist he once was. Yeah. So comes with a magnificent townhouse, not a townhouse, a mansion in Washington. Every possible cocktail party, every possible wonderful, celebrity is going to be flocking to your door when you're British ambassador in Washington. Just the sort of thing Mandelson loves to be, and he's witty and he loves to gossip, and he's the ultimate person you want to talk to at a cocktail party. And then this bombshell emerges, and I say emerges, but it didn't really, did it? Because anyone checking on Mandelson would have known his past the way I've given you a very brief resume. And they would have known in particular that he was dead friendly with Epstein throughout all the years when Epstein was now a scandal. After the notorious plea deal in Palm Beach in 2008, 2009, after he got his lenient prison sentence, which really meant he was on day release and having lunch at home and massages still every day with young girls. But everyone now knew about this, and nobody could say after 2009 they didn't know what Epstein was. He'd been involved in a terrible scandal, and yet they still flocked to his door, didn't they? They still carried on, doing whatever they could with him, business, social, all of them, taking his money. I mean, he was paying Mandelson large sums of money. He was paying Sarah Ferguson large sums of money. He was bailing out Andrew. He was introducing them to business people and vice versa. Well, it just doesn't end. It's the gift that keeps on giving. If you want to be cynical about our leaders and those who are great and powerful, as you say, we're just ants under their feet. And isn't this an expose into their morality, their lack of decency, their exploitation of young girls, and we now learn undoubtedly boys. It is just so disgusting and depressing that there's a side to this that, although I'm trying to make it funny and amusing, and in many ways it would need Shakespeare to be able to expose the disgusting depravity of our leaders as well. And seems to be no end to it in this particular scandal. I don't think we've heard the end of it even now. I mean, I think it's just going to run and run.
Oh my
It was
goodness.
called in, I think, the Times newspaper yesterday. They said this is the greatest scandal so far of the 21st century, and I think it's right.
Yeah, I mean, I think that I think this is the worst crisis for the royals since the abdication. I would even argue I think it's worse potentially than the abdication because I know things about Prince Andrew now ex Prince Andrew that I never wanted to know, that I don't want to I believe I don't want to believe. If I could bleach my brain from some of the pictures, from some of the details, I would. It puts the royals in such a terrible situation because this is, not about the institution's it's not about their image, it's about the institution's moral authority, and that's in jeopardy now because of all of this.
And let's be fair to other royals. You may not like now King Charles.
I do. I love King Charles.
Oh, well, that's wonderful. I actually respect him as well, and I've met him a few times.
I met him too, and I told him he was handsome. That was my opening line. I said, "You are so handsome."
That's what you tell all the girls. So, one thing you have to say about him, he's been a respectable figure. All right, he had an unhappy marriage with Diana, who must have been quite a handful to live with, if we're being fair. All his affections were with one other woman.
Yeah, that's a good point.
It was one other woman, it wasn't 100. Or in Andrew's case, he claims to have slept with over 1,000 women. You didn't have that. Yeah. That's in. Am I allowed to give a plug to a very good book? I don't know the author.
Is it Andrew Lowney's Entitled?
Exactly. Andrew Lowney's Entitled, which I read, came out about, was it a year ago?
Yeah, last year.
All the stuff in there that you might have wondered, is it right? You might have wondered, is it right at the time? That was a very well-researched book. But then now the Epstein stuff has come out. Of course, it was right, entirely right, and indeed the tip of the iceberg. Mm-hmm. But the picture painted of Andrew and Sarah Ferguson, what a pair of degenerates, not just sex.
I love that word, degenerates.
Seriously, degenerates. With their lovers, with their financial affairs, anywhere to make a fast buck, anyone to make a fast buck. There were just no limits on their greed and their disgusting lifestyle. There were just no limits on it. No moral limits at all. And you compare that with the late Queen Elizabeth, who was such a moral and correct woman and such an example of how to live to her nation and many other nations. And as I say, Charles, you can't make any of the kind of criticisms against him, I think, that you can. So there's one rotten apple in the barrel, but right. It's not fair to say the barrel is full of rotten apples.
Although I have argued this week, just so that I stay consistent, I don't want to not stay consistent, that I do believe part of this is you are who you associate with. I mean, Prince Andrew is accused of doing horrible things, but I do think that you are who you associate with. And Harry and Meghan have a godparent to one of their children named Tyler Perry, who's been accused of multiple, formally accused and taken to court for sexual harassment. And I've said in the last few days, they should be careful that their communication with this individual doesn't end up in, what do they call that when you, what do they call it when you have to provide your evidence? Discovery. They should be careful that their communication with Tyler Perry doesn't end up somehow in discovery and available to the entire world, the way we're now seeing Andrew's emails and Fergie's emails to Epstein. So Harry and Meghan haven't been accused of doing anything as horrible as Prince Andrew has. Andrew says he's innocent, but in the court of public opinion, it is that you are who you associate with. So you should be overly cautious about who you associate with.
Yes, of course.
Sorry for that diatribe. I apologize.
No, I agree with you. I have to. When I said you can't blame the whole barrel for one rotten apple, of course, I should have said there's another great exception, Prince Harry, but we won't go there. We won't go there.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about some of the new allegations against Andrew. There is a new woman who's alleged she spent the night with Andrew at Royal Lodge in 2010 after being sent to him by Jeffrey Epstein, according to her attorney in the United States, who's now talking. The lawyer says that following the overnight stay, she was given a private tour of Buckingham Palace and tea. The BBC said that they reached out to Andrew for comment. He didn't respond to their request. A source close to the palace stressed that the claim cannot be independently verified without identifying the woman. And if she wants to remain anonymous, they want to respect that and protect her as well. I've heard some people suggest this could be trafficking if she's sent there by Jeffrey Epstein. I've also read recently that because of some of these recent reports, the Metropolitan Police have stepped back up and are now investigating some of these reports. I won't go into the details, but in one of the emails, we find out about a Florida stripper suing Epstein because of a threesome between him, Andrew, and the stripper, and she didn't get paid what she was told she was going to get paid. As some of these new stories emerge, and I mean, even I guess over just the last week, from a UK legal standpoint, do they create any fresh criminal or civil exposure for Andrew or Sarah Ferguson, or are we mainly looking at reputational damage versus legal jeopardy?
May I just say that when you say Andrew didn't pay the stripper and Epstein didn't pay the stripper what was promised, it reminds me of the old joke of the aristocratic Polish army officer in the Second World War who is in Paris and goes with a prostitute, and she says afterwards, "Thank you, monsieur, that was wonderful. It will be 100 francs. And he answered, "Madam, a Polish cavalry officer never accepts payment." So I think that's probably Andrew, isn't it?
Oh, that is so entitled. Yes.
So entitled, such a prince. They were lucky to get him. And of course, Lowney's book says he boasts of having had more than 1,000 women. So, he probably
the only competition there are his teddy bears, which is also frightening to read about the mass amounts of teddy bears he collects.
Yes. So it's not just one woman that's come out of the woodwork. There's that one you say, but that's a different one, isn't it? From the emails between the two of them, where Epstein says, "I'm sending this 26-year-old Russian. She's terribly clever and really nice, and you're going to like her." And Andrew asks for a bit more information about her. And then later, the writing is to, "Oh, that's so grateful. That was, really a nice meeting. Thank you so much." So there were probably loads of others, but of course at 26, which the emails between Epstein and Andrew say this Russian girl was, at 26, he's obviously changing tack and going for a much older woman than is his norm.
Yeah, past her expiration date. I guess he's just expanding his horizons.
No doubt, no doubt.
Life is busy. Mornings start fast. Coffee is essential, and routines need to work, not complicate things. People want products that support how they live now, because real beauty is about supporting what keeps you strong, radiant, and feeling your best. That's where Native Path Collagen comes in. This is not a trendy, overhyped beauty product. This is the real deal. It contains type 1 and type 3 collagen, which makes up roughly 90% of the collagen found in the human body. These are the building blocks that support skin, hair, and joint health. Native Path helps support those systems. One single ingredient, no fillers, no nonsense, just high quality collagen. Each morning, one scoop can be mixed into coffee or a favorite beverage. It dissolves easily, has no taste, and fits seamlessly into an everyday routine. Many people report stronger hair, smoother and more hydrated skin, and less joint stiffness, especially in the mornings. Try it yourself. Visit getnativepath.com/unfiltered to take advantage of a special offer today. That's GETNATIVEPATH.com/unfiltered for a special bundle deal at a fraction of the retail price, backed by a risk-free 365-day guarantee. If you want to look good, feel good, and actually support your body instead of just hoping your moisturizer is magic, Native Path is where you start. GetNativePath.com/unfiltered.
But when you said, is he in trouble with the police? I'll give you, as always, my honest answer, which is he should be, but he won't be.
Yeah,
because Britain is still the sort of country that, they're never going to prosecute him, is my guess. Not in England. If he, of course, dared set foot in America, he would be prosecuted, but that's why he's never going to go near America. I mean, this stuff about him testifying to Congress, believe it when you see it, because any competent lawyer is going to advise him, as I would advise him if he were my client. My God, take your holidays anywhere else, but not in the United States. That's close to you now. So in Britain, where, of course, he's been royally disgraced, all his titles have been stripped from him by his elder brother, King Charles. Even his names are not what they were. He's been thrown out of his magnificent palace in the Royal Lodge in Windsor Park. I mean, he is now so down and out socially. Nobody's going to be returning his phone calls. So in Britain, with the class system and and its history and all the rest of it, everyone's going to think enough is enough. And people are already, if you read the comments below the articles in the newspapers, whenever there's something about Andrew, a good third of the comments, maybe more, say, oh, we're sick of it, leave him alone, don't kick him out when he's down, he's had enough. There's that sort of attitude. So the police, who are more than sensitive to the mood of the public, unfortunately look at how they're allowing, these marches in London every week for one side, but not for the other side, this kind of thing. So I can't see them. They'll pretend to investigate. They'll go through the motions. They'll say we've done everything possible and we don't find the evidence to bring any charges. That's my guess. We'll see in the months to come whether I'm right.
Can you see him moving to a country where there's no extradition to the United States? Can you see him being so paranoid or worried about the United States going after him? Go ahead.
I think the same thing's going to happen with the United States, by which I mean, let's go back to Prince Harry. Prince Harry writes a book that admits to every sort of drug use as a younger person. Now, if you or I had written that book or given such an interview, you, of course, forgive me, you're an American, and believe it or not, I am now as well, because I have an American wife and I took out American citizenship quite recently.
Wow.
Yes. To have an American wife is a high price to pay for your citizenship, Kinsey. No, I'm only kidding. I've got a wonderful wife. But I did, and so what I'm saying is, it applies to me. Let me put it this way. Well, I'm a dual British citizen, but I wouldn't have got my citizenship. I wouldn't have ever got a visa to be a tourist in America when I was simply a Brit. I wouldn't have got that if I had admitted to drug use, because it's an automatic no-no for being allowed into the States. As we know, the States today under President Trump is pretty tough on all sorts of immigrants who want to come in. And these laws are very rigorously enforced. But to whom does it not apply? To Prince Harry.
Yeah.
He writes this book and he gets away with it, and he's still happily in and out and living in Montecito, as we know. So at that kind of level, people have protection. They're untouchable.
It's so disappointing, huh? Rules for thee, but not for me.
I find it very disappointing. We're just ants in the system. It doesn't apply to us, but it does apply to them. Somebody must have said, and possibly Trump himself, leave the boy alone. Okay, we were all young once, but it wouldn't happen to anyone else, would it? So when you say, does Prince Andrew need to move to another country to avoid extradition by the States? I doubt that he will really think such extradition is likely. There'll be a quiet word between our ambassador to America, whoever he now is, and the American government. Don't kick a man when he's down, old boy. All right.
We do see like this conflict between President Trump and Vice President JD Vance, where Vice President Trump is like, it's a distraction. This is all a distraction. They don't want you to focus on the good work we're doing in the country today. And then you have JD Vance, who's like, we should go get him. Let's interview Andrew. Let's ask him what we want to know. So I get what you're saying, and I tend to agree with you. I also think that Trump loves the British royal family. He loves them. He loves standing next to them. He loves his mom, I know, absolutely adored the British royal family, had a scrapbook of Queen Elizabeth when she was Princess Elizabeth and Princess Margaret. So I don't think he would do anything to further embarrass them if he had the power to do so.
Bear in mind as well that you can't extradite anyone without the agreement of the local government. So in other words, if America ever did under President Vance or sometime in the future try to extradite Andrew Mountbatten-Windsor, ultimately it would be the British Home Secretary who had to decide whether to let him go. And we know how these things are equally fixed and corrupt. Let's just take the example of General Pinochet, the former leader of Chile, who'd been torturing people when in office to his heart's content and much worse. And when eventually Spain tried to extradite him from London, where he'd gone for medical treatment under Margaret Thatcher, and finally this case went on and on and on, and the final decision had actually to be made by the Blair government, who were now in office. Actually, I'm saying under Thatcher, I'm wrong. He was a welcome guest under Thatcher, but eventually he came back for medical treatment under the Blair government. And he was arrested, but they soon released him to house arrest in quite luxurious surroundings, obviously. And eventually, the legal process took many years, but eventually the court said, yes, he should go back to Spain. The law says he is liable to extradition. But finally, the Home Secretary of the day, under Blair, whose name was Jack Straw, he accepted the most transparently thin medical evidence you've ever seen in your life, saying that it would be, damaging to his health to be extradited and sent to Spain. And this was a man with all sorts of, terrible conditions, which frankly were no different from those that any old person suffers. I can say from some personal experience, probably will get better soon. In other words, my experience of these matters. But so that was the excuse not to let him be extradited, and he was simply sent back to Chile, where he died a much honored man, much honored and feted in his own country. So there's always the requirement for the local government to approve it at the end of the day. And what I'm saying is no British government, in my view, will ever approve sending Andrew back to America to face trial. So I think if you're advising Andrew, you're going to say to him, you're pretty safe, my lord, or maybe it's just Andy now, you're pretty safe, Andy. And if you have any doubts about it, then buy yourself somewhere in Dubai or something like that. By yourself. Maybe Epstein's Island is going cheap now.
Oh gosh, who would want to? Oh, I just can't imagine. I would need to bleach, Lysol, scrub. I wouldn't want to touch that island. That it just seemed, Jeremy to me. Let's talk about.
It's amazing. Isn't it amazing, by the way, just before we leave the island, that it wasn't just the politicians and the celebrities and the film stars, Kevin Spacey and all the rest of them. It wasn't just them. It was the industrialists who were 10 times richer than Epstein.
Yeah.
Isn't this strange that Bill Gates is there and all these horrible emails?
Did Richard Branson go there?
Richard Branson went there. Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. And again, I don't think they're going there just for the cooking, although it was no doubt excellent, and the nice beaches.
Yeah.
So isn't it amazing that just nobody saw through this guy, or if they did, They were having such a good time, they weren't going to let it worry them. Really, you have to hand it to him. He was one of the great confidence tricksters of all time, I would say, was Epstein.
I mean, I was asked this week how I felt, or what did he have to offer? I'm like, literally, what did he have to offer? But they said, how did he manage to collect this, phone book, this little black book full of all of these powerful people? And I said, honestly, I do think it's debauchery. I think it's sin. I think this is an elite club and no one is ever supposed to find out about it. And they just didn't realize that these messages would ever become public. And Epstein was so meticulous in documenting this because ultimately it was a way to have power over these people. It's just gross.
The nearest example I can think of, and it's only a very rough example, but there was notoriously in France, in Paris, a house of ill repute, only it was a house of excellent repute, run by a Madame Claude, if you mispronounce the French. Do you remember that? And Madame Claude had the most beautiful, educated, exquisite, and refined girls who worked there only. And they all made a fortune, but several of them married into the elite aristocracy of Europe. And
you usually have a hard time going from hooker to housewife.
Well, such was the quality of these ladies, a PhD was required even to get your way through the door. And they married very well and became duchesses and countesses, and in general, it wasn't known. The odd investigative journalist years later would find out and write about it, but in general, just wasn't known until years and years later who these ladies were. I mean, not all of them ended up that way, obviously, but many significant ones did. So that was the place where if you were visiting Paris and you were a very powerful and influential and important person whose tastes were heterosexual, obviously, that is where you would go for a lovely aperitif after dinner. So other than that, it's very hard to think of a brothel situation that has ever been done on the level and sophistication that Epstein did it. Just extraordinary.
It's unreal.
Almost in world history. Oh, it's unreal.
It's unreal. All right.
It's the gift that keeps on giving, because I just even now don't think we've had more than 20% of what's yet to come.
Well, I did want to ask you this. Sarah Ferguson's representatives said that her past apologies to him were, "You're a supreme friend," I think is what that email said, were an attempt to de-escalate after alleged threats from Epstein. So she comes back and says, after these emails leak, which was kind of like I think for Andrew, one of the first times the public turned against him was the way he behaved at the Duchess of Kent's funeral. Everyone's in mourning. Everyone looks so sad. And he's trying to crack jokes with Prince William, and Prince William is shutting him out. But Fergie, I think her downfall is when we start to get a glimpse of some of these emails. And she says, "You're the supreme friend." And she reacts by saying, "He was threatening me. He was threatening my family. He was threatening my girls. I was trying to protect them." Wouldn't we see those threats within these emails? And couldn't she have simply reported him to the police over said threats? Do you have a hard time accepting that explanation from her now that we have seen so much communication between them, and she's proposing to him, she's trying to introduce him to some of her female friends? It just doesn't ring very true to me after seeing so much of the communication between the two of them.
Again, if you read Andrew Lowney's book, which he devotes half his attention to Fergie, where do we start? If I shook hands with that girl, I would count my fingers afterwards. She has a history of giving one story, and then when that's exploded, she changes story, and when that's exploded, there's a third story, and when that's exploded, the fourth story is invariably, well, I had to give the previous three stories because, you see, I was under such terrible pressure because of A, B, C, D. So this is absolutely her modus operandi, and this is just the latest example. What are you going to say when emails of that kind emerge? After so much has emerged in past years, you know, the toe-sucking incident, I suppose we ought to explain that. She's photographed when she was married to Andrew with somebody sucking on her toe.
And wasn't he in finance too? Wasn't he?
He was indeed a financier, absolutely. Whether he was a pal of Epstein, I don't know. But
she has a type, is what we're trying to say. She's got a type.
There's incident after incident involving that girl. She's been a grifter really certainly since the marriage broke up, selling herself to try and raise money. I mean, let's just ignore the sexual part. I'm not speaking sexually, although she's had affair after affair with anyone, with wealthy people and so on. But just her business, the number of failed businesses and attempts to raise money and borrow money and beg, borrow and steal money.
Cash for access, her offering Prince Andrew up.
One thing after another. So to be sort of chasing after Epstein, and try and get, but then so many others were as well. He was look how much he was paying Mandelson, and Mandelson's husband, you know, a way of sort of paying Mandelson without it being on the books, paid his husband. And of course, what we actually see, the payments we see, for example, to Sarah, there's a few thousand here, a few thousand there, there's plane ticket, stuff for her daughters and so on. But what we see in a long experience of criminal law, as you kindly introduced me earlier, I know that if somebody's dishonest and you see 3 examples of it, you can usually assume there's another 97 that they haven't been caught for.
Yeah.
And I think far, far more than the tip of the iceberg we're seeing at the moment. Well, we're going to look, if you find that a person you idolized and respected and believed to be straight, once you find they've got feet of clay and they're in fact dishonest, the chances are it's much worse than you actually have evidence for, as we now have some evidence. So coming back to Fergie, do I accept her explanation? Not in a trillion years, personally.
What has been the most shocking email exchange that you've seen between Fergie, Andrew, and Epstein? To me, it's the girls, all of the girls going to visit him like a day after he's released for being a convicted sex offender.
Yeah, bringing your young children. They were what, teenagers at the time, I think.
I think they were 18 and 20 or 19 and 20, but still they're the age that Epstein has been hanging around with. Yeah.
Absolutely. The age he likes. I mean, it's mind-boggling, isn't it, that you would bring your own children into it to meet a man like that. It simply shows a degeneracy. That's the word I used before, and I would use it again.
I love that. I love that word. I love that word.
To pretend that you're blind to the kind of man he is when there's this long, long history. So these are as we were saying earlier, these are our great and good people.
It's unbelievable. Yeah. So we saw some flirtatious emails to Jeffrey Epstein, where she is pitching him a single friend who has a great body. In another email, she jokes that they should get married.
Yes.
Just marry me.
It's a joke. There's many a true word spoken in jest. So when I read that, why don't you marry me? Ha ha.
You felt like that was a serious. I mean, I proposed to someone several times this week. I didn't mean it.
I didn't think it was a mere joke at all. When you think about it, it would have given him a certain, he'd have been on the front page of Hello magazine if he wanted it. It would have given him let's not forget Jackie Kennedy married Onassis after President Kennedy. You can think of many examples where it's not as silly as it might look at first sight. So I think she meant it when she said that. She would have been more than delighted if he'd said, "What a great idea, do you know, for me to marry a
Wait,
so-called
do we think this is a horrible question to ask you, and I apologize, but it sounds like allegedly Andrew and Epstein might have shared Ghislaine, a stripper in Florida, and we're hoping not Fergie, is basically what my mind is exploding right now. I'm just hoping that that's not the case.
Who knows?
Who knows? I'm sorry to go there. I've foul place to go.
When you're dealing with this level of, I will call it corruption. I don't mean, well, it is financial in part, but I mean just a general moral degeneracy. Who knows what people are capable of behind the scenes and with their clothes off?
Yeah. Well, this will be my last point. Thank you for being so generous with your time. But you mentioned Andrew's entitlement. Did you see this email from Fergie to Epstein? She says, well, wait, I just lost it. It was something about how I'm 100% sure that the British royal family are going to hang me out to dry. If they could behead me, they would. And she's just having this pity party in this email to Epstein. And it's literally because she offered cash for access. Like, these are the consequences of her actions. And she's saying, oh, woe is me. The royal family won't protect me.
Yes, actually, I thought it was a surprisingly witty line for her. She said that nobody has ever left the royal family with their head still on.
Yeah.
And historically, that's fairly accurate. You know, if one goes back over the centuries, it's absolutely accurate, actually. Well, we don't live in that kind of world anymore, but there's many people in Britain who would say yes, and we wish we did, because deservedly so in her case, because her history of entanglement and scandal and grifting and cash for virtually anything is worse, if anything, than Andrew's. When I read the Lowney book, I actually thought to myself of the famous Kipling line that the female of the species is more deadly than the male. She was worse than him, you know. She was the sort of the instigator of what he did in many cases. They weren't a power couple. They were a really corrupt couple.
Toxic couple. Toxic
couple.
Well, do you have any predictions for Andrew? I had predicted I felt like Fergie would run off and write a book about Diana. I don't think she would jeopardize her current relationship with the royal family, but Diana's long gone and she has plenty of secrets. Remember, they were scheming together to leave their husbands at the same time to try to humiliate them in the monarchy. So I suspect she's not done talking, but I don't think it's in Andrew's best interest to jeopardize his relationship with the king, because the king is financing his life for probably the rest of his life.
The king is giving him handouts, including somewhere remote on the farm to live in Norfolk, on the Sandringham estate, and without, much as he must hate his brother now, much as he must be totally alienated from his elder brother, but as you rightly say, if he goes too far, that lifeline could stop, and what does he do then? But Fergie's in a precarious position. She's totally toxic socially. Nobody's inviting her, nobody's returning her calls. The magnificent luxurious lifestyle she knew she can no longer afford. Even their own two daughters are having to distance themselves from their parents, and are noticeably doing so. How's she going to live? Andrew ain't got any money to spare on her now. Nobody's going to want to give her cash presents. There's no access she can give. Nobody's going to buy her books unless, as you say, back to what you first said, unless she writes some disgusting dish the dirt piece of tat about Diana and what she saw when she was in the royal family. And I think she's probably going to be driven to that. Save that, she might be frightened of repercussions. I won't say more than that if you fight down and dirty with an institution like the royal family, it may be that they have ways to get you back.
That was a mic drop. That's a wonderful place for us to wrap up. Jonathan Goldberg KC of the I Rest My Case podcast, now available on YouTube and wherever you get podcasts. What a treat it is to spend time with you. Thank you for hanging out with me again.
Really, it's my pleasure, because you have had many interviews in an all too long career, but you don't always get the sort of well-researched and intelligent questions that I always get from you.
You're so sweet. Agree with us, disagree with us. Let us know in the comments below. Make sure you like, subscribe, and share this video with a friend. And make sure you go subscribe to Jonathan's podcast, I Rest My Case. Bye, everyone.